One of the few ongoing storylines of Torchwood Series 1 was the existence of the Resurrection Gauntlet, a mysterious alien artifact capable of, well, resurrecting people. The last we'd seen of this gauntlet was when it was destroyed at the end of They Keep Killing Susie. However, as we all know, gloves come in pairs. Originally, the production team planned on resurrecting Susie for a second time in Series 2, but Indira Varma was unavailable, so they decided to kill off and resurrect one of the core Torchwood members, ultimately deciding on their fan favourite Owen, who had met his sudden demise during the final scene of Reset. Dead Man Walking would see him brought back to life, unknowingly unleashing death itself upon the world. This episode has become acclaimed by many Torchwood fans for its exploration of immortality and a focus on Owen as a character. However, many critics have long questioned the balancing of plot threads, along with the design of the antagonist. So I guess it's time to dive into Dead Man Walking, one of Torchwood Series 2's most popular episodes, and let's see whether fans are right to hype it up as much as they do.
Well, I'm still here, and actually I feel amazing.
There's a certain sad level of irony as we see Martha beginning her autopsy of Owen. We're so used to seeing him doing these autopsies, taking some poor guy's body apart to examine their death, but this time he's the poor guy splayed out on the cold table being examined. It shows just how much of a cruel twist of fate his death was, along with Martha taking his place as Team Doctor. I spoke in that previous review about how the episode focused on her so heavily that you could view it through the lens of establishing Owen's replacement, since she's a Doctor like he is. Indeed, that's exactly how this episode begins, Martha seemingly sliding in to take his place. However, before she can start, Jack demands they leave the body alone until he returns, going to a mysterious fortune teller. I quite like this start to the episode because the audience themselves would still be in denial about Owen's death. So this is a way to play on that and keep their hopes up that Jack can somehow fix it. After all, we know how much he loves his team and everyone around him always seems to die, so we can understand he would stop at nothing to try and undo Owen's death. Indeed, Jack breaks into a derelict church full of weevils. I love the directing in the scene, it's incredibly eerie and unsettling, helped massively by the design of the ramshackle settlement, with so many trinkets and junk all piled up. We've always seen the weevils in isolation, but now we can get a sense as to what they're like out in the wild with their own little squalid hoarder's nest. However, Indiana Jack grabs what he's looking for and makes it out alive. Well, I'd say alive, but by the looks of him, he died a couple of times on the way out. We then find out all of this was to find the other Resurrection Gauntlet. This is a phenomenal reveal, and it helps to tie up a dangling loose end from They Keep Killing Susie in Series 1.
Well, I wouldn't be too sure. That's the thing about gloves, sir. They come in pairs.
It makes sense to revisit this device, because in that previous series the team had a glove capable of bringing anyone back from the dead, so Jack retrieving the other glove is just the logical progression. It also lends a sense of dread as Gwen herself points out,
"You can't use it now after Susie."
We saw exactly what happens as a consequence of using the gauntlet, since Susie hijacked Gwen's own life force and started draining her to bring herself back to life. It's an incredibly risky gadget to use, so its presence in this episode immediately shows just how far Jack is willing to go for Owen.
Because I wasn't ready to give up on you. I guess I was hoping for a miracle.
Despite the previous glove not working for Jack, this time he certainly other will, partly because he won't allow it not to. Luckily for him, it does work. Again, this is a nice bit of irony because it's now Owen's turn to wake up all confused about where he is and what just happened to him. Something we saw with other people in the previous 2 Resurrection Gauntlet episodes. I do like that he quickly answers his own questions, mainly because this is his workstation, so he can easily put the pieces together. The scene is also brilliant for showing just how hard it is for everyone in a moment like this. You're given mere seconds to say goodbye to a friend. There's no way anyone could be ready for that. So it makes a lot of sense Gwen would draw a blank. You wouldn't be able to think of enough to say with such little time left. However, after Tosh declares her love and Owen gives Jack the code for the morgue, the 2 minutes are up and he dies once more. This is something we're used to after everything changes and They Keep Killing Susie, but this time it shows us that Torchwood members aren't the exception and still die after the 2 minutes. They're just regular people at the end of the day. It also hits harder because we have that emotional attachment to Owen. We've come to know him so well that his final death feels more heart-wrenching than him being shot at the end of Reset, since at least that death was too quick to comprehend. This time, there are no loopholes, no way for Torchwood to bend the rules of nature to bring him back. This is it. Owen Harper is no more. all of this is why it's so shocking that he's still alive, even without the glove. So I guess Torchwood members really are the exception.
Oh, here we go again.
I appreciate that they immediately rule out the possibility of a repeat of the Susie situation. In They Keep Killing Susie, she survived by draining Gwen, but this time Jack is fine, there's no link between him and Owen. It's also good that Owen desperately tries to reason why he's still alive, almost bargaining, even though he himself knows he should still be dead. It's a well-handled, chaotic turn of events, something none of the Torchwood team have any answers to. They don't know how Owen is still alive, they don't know where he's drawing life from, and they don't even know where the gauntlets come from in the first place. They're completely in the dark, so it's a smart way of differentiating this episode from They Keep Killing Susie and not just falling into it being a retread. I also think there's some wonderful continuity in the background, as Gwen keeps well clear of the gauntlet anytime it's near her. Even though she survived Susie's plan, she was still mere seconds away from dying, so it's pretty obvious she'd be more than a little bit traumatised by what happened the last time they had one of these gloves kicking around. She calls up Rhys for comfort, and I think this actually kind of harkens back to him dying in End of Days. In that climactic finale, Billis had shanked him to death, with Gwen having to face that reality before time was ultimately reversed. She knows firsthand how lucky she is to still have Rhys, and Owen's situation is a sobering reminder of that, since Rhys was allowed to cheat death without consequence, whilst Owen has been forced into a nightmare limbo between life and death. I feel like that's truly what prompts Gwen's emotional moments, so it's a good scene for her character.
Daphne.
One of the oldest and most persistent questions humanity as a species has asked is what happens when we die. It's a question that has formed entire religions and sparked endless debates as we attempt to stave off our inevitable fate of shuffling off this mortal coil. It's no surprise then that Martha immediately wants to know what happened to Owen when he died. After all, it's not every day you get to ask someone that. Even though he tries to put up a jokey front with her to avoid admitting the truth, he caves and reveals there's simply nothing, corroborating what Susie had also admitted in that earlier story, along with him seeing something in the darkness, exactly what she had claimed as well. This sequence is so perfectly disorienting and creepy. You really feel Owen's panic as he's thrust into this darkness. No sense of direction, no up or down, it's just nothingness. It creates a similar effect as the flashback in Ghost Machine. This is a snarky and often emotionless man, but his experience here drives him into such a sense of fear and panic that he clutches onto Jack, almost for safety, something so out of character for Owen, which is why it works so well. I think it really sells you on the danger and power of whatever he felt, so it's a good way to establish the antagonist of the episode, along with continuing that primal fear we all have about finding out there's nothing after death. Well, nothing nice, anyway. To make matters worse, it turns out that Owen's cells are transforming into something completely unknown. It continues to add that great mystery of whatever's going on here, especially as he turns into an edgy demon speaking in tongues and borrowing Miss Hoskins' all-black contact lenses from the next Doctor. I guess being resurrected really does a number on you. It's no surprise then that the team go into panic mode about his readings, especially since he's upped and vanished somehow, escaping out into the normal world. Despite, being 50% demon thing at this point. Also, can I just say I adore the sequence of Owen out on the town. I never know how this type of shot is done, but it always looks great, since here it serves as a representation of how disconnected he now feels with the very lifestyle he used to lead. He was always hitting up bars, but now he's quite literally dead inside, numb to everything. Especially because none of his bodily functions work anymore. He can't even get drunk and get laid like he used to. It creates a sense as to how reliant our lives are on our actual experiences. But Owen can't have those anymore, so what's the point of even existing? It's not surprising this sense of nihilism makes Owen lash out at Jack, who is responsible for this in the first place by bringing him back. To be honest, Owen does have a point. At least when he was properly dead, that was it, he was no more. But all he is now is a walking corpse, and I think anyone would rather stay dead than have to face the hellish limbo he's found himself in.
Take these things for granted. It's only when they're slipping away you realise how amazing they are.
Jack and Owen are arrested for their little scuffle and thrown into jail, where they can hash out their issues. I like that they have this moment together locked in the cell, no way out but to talk through these problems as they're contrasts of each other. As Owen points out, Jack has eternity, whilst he could slip away in mere seconds. However, even Jack's immortality is a horrible existence. He lives so long that nothing really means anything anymore, and he never has to face the consequences of, well, anything. It really shows how much immortality would devalue life, because everything becomes a little less special. It's a good way to put everything into perspective. The pair are essentially two sides of the same coin in an interesting way. One is alive forever and one is dead forever. So I like how the scene plays on that similarity well, exploring very existential themes about the reality of immortality and how much of a curse it really is. After leaving the police station, Jack and Owen are chased by weevils into the only car park in the entirety of Cardiff. Seriously, it's the same one in every Torchwood episode. It's an entertaining and intense sequence though as the monsters close in, seemingly seeking revenge for Jack stealing the gauntlet. However, in a sudden twist, they all cower in fear as Owen becomes the demon guy again, just as the team back at the base translate his words into a dark statement about hungering for Earth. Sounds like one hell of an appetite then. I think it's a great idea to involve the weevils, especially because Owen had already formed a sort of connection with them back in combat, specifically the final scene of that story. Although this episode doesn't really do anything else with the weevils and they just kind of stick out as a weird plot contrivance.
So I'm king of the weevils.
This eventually all ties back to the very beginning, because the church Jack found the gauntlet in was the centre of a miracle resurrecting a little girl, who inadvertently unleashed death itself onto the town. So I guess this glove is kind of like a genie lamp, but evil.
She brought death with her, and he walked amongst them.
Despite not exactly being Torchwood procedure to take stock in mythology, they don't want to leave it to chance in case Owen transforms into the personification of death and dooms the entire planet. So they decide to embalm him to freeze-dry his brain and essentially kill him for good. It's an interesting concept. Like we saw with Susie, once someone has been resurrected, they can't be shot or stabbed. They just take the punishment without even feeling it. So the team need to take extreme, unconventional measures here. It's a nice touch that this makes him almost have to accept death all over again, since this time it's his choice and he has to march right into it. It's a brave move by him to have been given another lease of life and walk away for the greater good, because his life is now hollow and meaningless. It feels incredibly weighty as he walks through the hub for the final time. There's no going back to his old life, there's nothing for him, and you can see how much that pains him to try and accept. However, after Owen is strapped in, the glove springs to life like some kind of horror B-movie. It's an incredibly goofy visual, despite the moment being played completely seriously like some intense villain has derailed their plans, but it's just a glove scuttling around. I think it's a weird, tonal clash with the intended atmosphere. I mean, just look at the episode Rose in Doctor Who Series 1. There was a similar scene with the Auton's arm, but it was played as a joke, since the concept is comical. But here, it's deadly serious, which I just think detracts from the weight of the scene. Owen destroys it, but not after it had latched onto Martha and given her terrible old age makeup. It's really not convincing. Although it does show the sheer power the glove wields that it can just steal your life like this. It gets worse for the team though, as Owen completes his transformation, unleashing the smoke monster from Lost. Hey, whilst it's here, maybe they can ask it what the fuck that whole thing was about? Because I sure as hell don't know. The Torchwood team race Martha to a hospital since she's on the verge of death. It kinda feels like a weird and sudden development to introduce so late. You had the mystery of the glove, Owen remaining resurrected, the transformation into death, and the whole Weevil thing. But then the episode remembers it needs a conclusion, so it just ages up Martha almost solely to get them to the hospital for death to run rampant. I just think it's unnecessary and kind of tacked on. However, it does the job as they realise death is at the hospital already, like Jack says.
If you were death, wouldn't you target a hospital?
He's completely right, since it's no different to going to McDonald's for a burger when you're hungry. Indeed, death starts to swoop in and wipes out an entire ward of patients. It's a really creepy scene, and I love how death is initially represented as this mysterious mist, with all the heart rate monitors slowly going flat one by one. But then it's ruined because death just turns out to be a giant skeleton with dodgy CGI. This is my biggest problem with the antagonist in the episode. They over-designed it by incorporating the skeleton, which takes away a lot of the terror. It's much more intimidating when it's a shapeless fog lurking in the shadows. You can already see its pure evil just by looking at it. You don't need it to be a literal skeleton as well. By all means, have something physical lurking within it, but make it almost impossible to see, since that would make it even more terrifying because it would represent an element of the unknown. As it stands, it's incredibly hard to take seriously, and creates a similar tonal clash to The Glove just a scene earlier. Somehow, the entire hospital is able to evacuate before Death can complete its mission. Either this hospital won the NHS award for quickest fire drills for 5 years in a row, or Death just really likes to take its time eating. It's a bit weird how in one scene it kills about 7 people in seconds, and then probably takes about 10 minutes to kill everyone else. However, thanks to those darn video games, a young cancer patient called Jamie doesn't know about the evacuation, so he doesn't escape as Death continues to increase the kill count at a painfully slow rate. Because remember, this is Torchwood Series 2 Plot Device Boogaloo. Thankfully, because Owen was the gateway for the Reaper, he can sense when it's near. Handy that, isn't it? Indeed, it's now after Jamie, and even with the whole bad CGI skeleton situation, this is still a chilling moment. If anything, the jankiness actually adds to the eerie atmosphere as it shuffles towards him ever so slowly. This is what I mean about only alluding to something physical inside the smoke. You get brief glimpses of it, and that's what makes it so creepy. It moves so slowly yet surely, knowing it will get its mark eventually. To draw on the Doctor's speech in Heaven Sent, Death maintains the same pace and waits for you to slow down. That's what makes this moment so chilling in my opinion, for what it represents. However, Owen does his best impression of the Doctor and rescues Jamie, quite literally snatching him from the jaws of death. And rather conveniently for everyone involved, Death has consumed 12 people now, only needing one more to become unstoppable and conquer Earth.
After 10,000 years, I'm free! It's time to conquer Earth!
There's then the calm before the storm as Owen tries to calm Jamie down, who has already accepted his death since his chemotherapy didn't work. It's really touching as Owen gives him this rousing speech about beating death, and I appreciate it doesn't go too far with the child cancer angle. It's an extremely touchy and sensitive subject, which I wouldn't trust Torchwood with, so it's a relief that it only slightly dips its toes into the water without going much further. It's simply a way of giving Owen himself hope, since it puts a lot of things into perspective. He's a doctor and this is who he's saving, giving him something to fight for, so I think it's a good part of a pretty disappointing climax. With the revelation that Death was originally stopped by the resurrected girl, Owen knows what he has to do now. It's then that my least favourite trope rears its ugly head. Indeed, it's time for the somebody has to die trope, as Owen tricks Tosh and locks her and Jamie outside so he can't be stopped. I really hate this trope, but I think this is one of the more acceptable uses. Here you have Owen, a man who took so much of life for granted, sleazing it up in Series 1 before mellowing out and becoming more caring and well-rounded in Series 2. He spent the episode coming to terms with his lack of a purpose in his new life, but now he's found it. So him choosing to stare death in the face isn't just a plot contrivance, it's a powerful character moment. The music of this scene is absolutely exquisite, and Burn Gorman knocks it out of the park as he confronts Death. I genuinely feel like this could have been the climax to a series finale, since those are the episodes you tend to get these big brave sacrifices from a main cast member. It's so incredibly weighty and dramatic, everything comes together perfectly. Well, I say everything. Again, the biggest letdown of this scene is Death itself, because of the skeleton. While I appreciate the dancing with death metaphor they were aiming for with this visual, it looks unbearably goofy since the CGI doesn't match at all. Much like in Meat, you can tell this is a human actor touching something that doesn't exist. He's just kind of flailing around and it detracts from that powerful atmosphere of the moment. However, he's able to conquer the Spectre, which disappears into nothingness, and Martha is restored to her normal age. Which, again, makes me question why they aged her up in the first place. The final climactic moment works well enough, but I can't help but wonder if it would have worked even better if the plot was more focused and trimmed down from the get-go. Owen then reflects on the very chaotic events of the past day, accepting responsibility for what happened to Martha, even if she just shrugs it off as part of the job. It continues to show this new personality of Owen after what he's been through and what he experienced. His entire worldview has changed in such an extreme way, and I think it really shows with how he acts in this epilogue. Gone is that snarkiness and jaded outlook, replaced by a contrasting sense of responsibility for himself and others, which is shown as he asks to stay on the team so he can pay back this debt that traded 12 lives for his own. In the space of just a few minutes, we immediately understand what Owen has become, and how he's been hit by this resurrection. So it's a successful ending, although it cuts off a bit weirdly, as if he's about to say something but then it just fades to credits. I just find it strange. It also annoys me that the Next Time trailer for Day in the Death makes it seem like he's been kicked out and gone rogue. I understand it's to get viewers intrigued, but it's a complete misrepresentation of the following episode and kind of flies in the face of the message of this final scene, where it seemed like he was finally on board the better person train. It's not really Dead Man Walking's fault, but I just felt like I had to point it out. Dead Man Walking is one of those Torchwood episodes beloved by many, but as much as it pains me to say, I think it's definitely overrated. Now, don't get me wrong, I love how it handles Owen's struggles at dealing with his new, resurrected life, and the contrast of his immortality compared to Jack. But the plot is massively bloated and the episode doesn't seem to know which aspects to focus on, so it's a bit muddled and the big climax comes far too suddenly. It almost feels like two episodes awkwardly smashed up together, which definitely detracts from it. That being said, Burn Gorman is absolutely fantastic as Owen, and the music throughout the episode is great. There is a lot to like about the episode, which is something I want to make clear. There are interesting themes and it's a good follow-up to the Resurrection Gauntlet storyline in Series 1, successfully paying off the idea of a second glove. I think I'd put Dead Man Walking at a B on the Torchwood Series 2 tier list. It's an episode I remembered fondly, but I just can't shake my disappointment after rewatching it. As I said, it doesn't seem to know what it wants to be, and the tone is constantly changing and contradicting the serious events on screen. The plot with Owen's possession sometimes steers far too closely to writer Matt Jones's own Doctor Who story, The Impossible Planet. And also, it goes without saying, but the visual of death really hampers the episode. Just take out the skeleton and it would be way more sinister, but it looks far too goofy in its current state. Dead Man Walking is a good episode, and the focus on Owen is much appreciated, but I just don't quite think it lives up to the hype, which means I'm probably going to get crucified in the comments. Uh-oh. And I'd like to give an extra special thank you to all my gold level patrons: Alex Marston, Calvin, Daniel Shillito, Fallon Cortez, Franz Horn aka Line Vortex, George, John, and Stephen Evan Miller. Thank you so much for your support.